In a world where every second is monetized, where your morning begins with pings and your nights end with exhaustion, something curious is happening. Quietly, invisibly, millions are walking away, not to escape, but to return. They're not fleeing cities, but they're stepping out of the race. And here's the twist. They're doing less and living more. This isn't laziness. This is slow living, the most radical form of rebellion in the 21st century. In this video, we'll explore why slowing down isn't a luxury, it's survival. Why shaving minutes off your day doesn't make you freer, but emptier. And how the art of extreme minimalism, when paired with intentional slow living, becomes not just a lifestyle, but a statement. Stay with me till the end, because the fifth insight may just unhook you from the burnout blueprint you never knew you were trapped inside. Before we had calendars, clocks, or countdowns, we followed something older, something innate. Time was once experienced through rhythms, not schedules. The soft retreat of tides, the tilt of shadows, the cooling of evening air. But somewhere between factory bells and flashing smartphone reminders, we traded these rhythms for measurements, seconds, deadlines, alarms, and in doing so, we abandoned one of the most ancient forms of alignment with life itself. Slow living is not about doing everything slowly. It's about restoring this lost tempo, the one that pulses in sync with the human nervous system. Modern life is a sharp, digital pulse. But the body? The body moves like wind across wheat. Gradual, layered, seasonal. When you live in perpetual acceleration, your senses, designed for nuance, flatten. Food becomes fuel. Days blur. Conversations clip into transactions. Attention splinters. And worst of all, you forget what enough feels like. In the Appalachian Mountains of early America, entire villages once aligned their work with the moon, not out of poetry, but practicality. Certain crops thrived if planted during the waxing phase. Rest days followed the full moon, when energy peaked. Today, we scoff at such timing, favoring grind now, rest later. But slow living revives these organic cues, anchoring you to a rhythm that doesn't just serve productivity, but preserves sanity. Extreme minimalism takes this one step further. It doesn't just ask what you own. It asks what you obey. If your life is still ruled by schedules built for machines, not minds, then no amount of decluttering will bring peace. True clarity begins when you no longer measure a day by how fast you moved, but by how present you were inside it. And here lies the secret rebellion. By restoring the human rhythm, you no longer just slow down. You step out of the system entirely, into a cadence that's as old as firelight and as soft as silence. Stay with me. The next shift we explore might feel even more radical than this one. In the churn of modern life, multitasking is hailed as mastery. But what if it's actually a form of internal noise, camouflaged chaos dressed up as competence? Slow living dares to ask a question we've long forgotten. What happens when you give your full self to just one thing? There was a time when this wasn't strange, it was the only way. A Japanese carpenter in the 1800s would spend days carving a single wooden beam, letting his breath align with the grain of the timber. A Sicilian olive farmer would tend to each tree by hand, year after year, knowing the pace of the harvest was not his to dictate. These weren't acts of slowness. They were acts of precision, respect, and they yielded not just higher quality, but deeper peace. Today, we're told we must juggle, scale, maximize. But the price of this hyper-efficiency is something no one wants to admit. A frayed nervous system, a diluted presence, and an undercurrent of quiet grief. Grief for the things we rushed through and never truly experienced. Even rest becomes a slot on the to-do list. Even meals get sliced by scrolling. Extreme minimalism, when practiced through the lens of slow living, becomes a kind of filtration system. It removes not just excess objects, but excess obligations. You begin to ask not, can I do more? But, should this even belong in my life? This question alone carves space for mastery, for meaning, for a kind of attention that feels almost extinct in our era. Doing one thing well is now a luxury, an art form. and a rebellion. When you choose it, you begin to taste life again. A conversation unfolds instead of being checked off. A cup of tea becomes a meditation, not a distraction. A task, completed with full intention, becomes a mirror for your inner stillness. And in that stillness, you begin to remember what it feels like to be human. Up next, we'll explore an idea even quieter, but perhaps more radical still. A kind of silence that rewires the entire nervous system. Let's keep going. There is a silence that heals. Not the awkward kind we try to fill in elevators or the sterile quiet of noise-canceling headphones, but an ancient, living silence. The kind found in early dawns before the world stirs. The kind monks once listened to for guidance. The kind that wild animals move within. Somewhere along the arc of progress, we lost this silence, and with it, a profound form of knowing. Slow living doesn't just invite slowness of movement. It carves out acoustic space, room for silence to return. And in doing so, it reintroduces you to something deeper than thought, awareness. Not the kind you perform, but the kind you remember. In early Quaker meetings, entire congregations would sit together in silence for over an hour, waiting for truth to arise, not from a sermon, but from within. There was no rush, no script, only presence. This was not emptiness. It was depth. Contrast that with today, where every silence is seen as a glitch. If a podcast pauses, we skip ahead. If no one texts back, we refresh. If there's nothing playing in the background, we feel wrong, unsettled, like we're missing something. But maybe that discomfort is the soul begging for space. Extreme minimalism, when rooted in silence, becomes a sacred practice, not just of removing noise, but protecting signal. You begin to realize that not everything needs your response. Not every thought needs to be shared. Not every sound is information. Silence starts to feel like a sanctuary, one that cleanses, clarifies, and connects. And here's where the rebellion sharpens. In a world that profits from your attention, choosing silence is an act of economic disobedience. You stop feeding the algorithms. You stop reacting on cue. You become untrackable. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, don't reach for more input. Reach for less. Sit. Listen, not to music or words, but to the silence behind them. Because that's where clarity begins. And in our next moment together, we'll go even further into the invisible architecture of your day and how it quietly decides the shape of your life. Before a single word is spoken, before your feet even touch the floor, your day has already been designed. Not by you, but by defaults. Notifications waiting on your phone. App icons arranged for compulsive return. Furniture positioned for screen viewing, not stillness. Even the light in your room, too bright, too cold, pulls your mind into vigilance before your mind has even woken up. This is the invisible architecture of your day, and most of us are living inside someone else's blueprint. Slow living asks us to take the blueprint back, not through massive renovations or retreats into nature, but through quiet, radical edits to how we engage with the space and time around us. Think of a monk's morning. Deliberate steps, repetitive rituals, nothing urgent. There's a reason monks, across traditions and continents, have always begun their day in silence, in stillness. They understand something we've forgotten, that the way you enter the day shapes what the day can offer in return. This isn't about routines. It's about agency. Extreme minimalism strips this invisible scaffolding down to its bones. You begin to remove not just items, but influence. Those little nudges that pull your attention before your intention has a chance to speak. A phone outside the bedroom. A cup of tea with no screen. A chair facing the window, not the wall. These are not aesthetic choices. They are philosophical ones. You are choosing to inhabit your day instead of merely reacting to it. And here's the paradox. The less you cram into your environment, the more the space begins to serve you. Clarity starts to rise not from what's added, but from what's no longer present. Your home becomes a compass. Your time becomes a rhythm again. And your nervous system, long trained to brace for impact, begins to soften. This is the quiet revolution, designing your day as if your well-being depended on it. Because it does. In the final point ahead, we'll look at the deepest layer of this shift, not just how you live, but why, and what happens when your reason returns. Beneath the clutter, beneath the urgency, beneath the carefully optimized life, there is something ancient trying to breathe. It's not a productivity goal. It's not a 5-year plan. It's a question. A haunting, beautiful, unavoidable question. Why am I alive? For most, that question is silenced, not by catastrophe, but by noise. Tasks, deadlines, errands, updates. The endless scurry keeps the deeper longing buried. But slow living, when practiced with intention, has a strange side effect. It brings that question back to the surface. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. Because without distraction, without performance, without constant movement, you're left with the mirror. The one that doesn't flatter, doesn't distort. It just reflects. And in that reflection, many people discover something shocking. They've been living someone else's life, pursuing someone else's dreams, carrying someone else's urgency. But there is a moment, and it only arrives in stillness, where something shifts, where you realize that meaning doesn't come from achievement, but from alignment. And that alignment cannot be bought, downloaded, or outsourced. It must be cultivated, slowly, deliberately, from the inside out. Extreme minimalism is not just about owning less. It's about removing the layers that keep you from hearing your own life speak. You begin to notice what stirs your soul, not just what gets likes. You begin to sense what gives you energy instead of what merely distracts you. A walk becomes a sermon. A conversation becomes nourishment. A quiet evening becomes proof that you're already enough. This isn't escapism. It's emergence. You're not withdrawing from life. You're finally arriving in it. Fully, gently, freely. So the next time the noise rises, pause. Not to fight it, not to fix it, but to ask, what truly matters here? Because from that question, your reason begins to form. Not all at once, but like mist lifting slowly from a lake at sunrise. And that is where slow living ultimately leads. Not to less life, but to more presence inside it. In just a moment, we'll bring everything together with clarity and a small invitation that might change your entire direction. Stay with me. The world will keep spinning faster. More alerts, more speed, more demands for your attention. But now you know, you don't have to match its pace. You can step out. You can choose a different rhythm, one built not on urgency, but on clarity. Slow living isn't a retreat. It's a return to what matters, to how life feels when you're fully inside it. And in that stillness, something extraordinary begins. Not just less clutter or more peace, but the quiet reawakening of your reason for being. If this resonated with you, there's more waiting. Dive deeper into this way of life through other videos on this channel that explore the small spaces of microtopia or the enduring depth of elderly wisdom. Each playlist is a window into a life less frantic and more intentional. Choose one, watch with care, and begin building your own quiet revolution, one simple moment at a time.